Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us today. There's some major wildfires in California and some major power outages, so we have the latest there. Plus, we're on the ground in northern Syria, where Turkey has officially launched their attack against the Kurds. And we're going to check in and see how everyone's feeling, because today is World Mental Health Day. But first, here are your headlines.
President Trump says he's planning to get involved in the immunity controversy stemming from a crash that killed a British teenager. 19-year-old Harry Dunn died after being struck by a car driven on the wrong side of the road by the wife of a U.S. diplomat. She fled England, claiming diplomatic immunity.
The woman was driving on the wrong side of the road. And that can happen. You know, those are the opposite roads. That happens. It was an accident. It was a terrible accident.
The president spoke to the British Prime Minister about the case Wednesday. Trump says the U.S. is now trying to arrange a meeting between the diplomat's wife and Harry Dunn's parents.
As the president arrived for the press conference yesterday, his briefing notes were caught on camera by a Washington Post photographer. It read, Secretary of State Pompeo told UK Foreign Secretary Raab that the spouse of the government employee will not return to the United Kingdom. Harry Dunn's mother reacted to this revelation.
I wanted to talk to us face to face, just do the humane thing and get on the plane and come back. She's being dishonest by running away from us. And we feel the governments could possibly be being dishonest with us as well at the moment, and it's just not right. That feeling in the pit of our stomachs, it's not right.
Actor Cuba Gooding Jr. is in court today to face charges against him for forcible touching. Gooding allegedly touched a woman in a bar last June in an encounter caught on video. The defense suggests there wasn't any wrongdoing.
One big swing sent the Washington Nationals to the National League Championship Series. Howie Kendrick's 10th inning grand slam lifted the Nats to a 7-3 win over the Dodgers in Game 5 of their division series. They were going nuts. Washington will play the St. Louis Cardinals in the NLCS.
And we begin in California with an overnight blackout. Some residents frustrated with the electric company PG&E, who started to proactively turn off hundreds of thousands of their customers' power in preparation for the potential dangerous wildfires. Those outages were executed with delays and a bit of confusion, but necessary, as one fire in Mariposa County is already burning nearly 4,400 acres. So I want to go to Will Carr, who is there in San Francisco with the latest. Will?
Good morning, Kimberly. Those Diablo winds really picked up overnight. That's why they've shut the power off. In fact, throughout the course of the morning, we've seen the tree branches on this tree rustling back and forth. But even with that threat, there is just so much frustration across this area that PG&E, the utility company here, has actually had to set up these blue barriers. You can see that security guard in the background. It's because the company says they're worried about the safety of their employees, as hundreds of thousands of people still are without power across this area. That has impacted businesses. It's impacted homeowners and families. I spoke with one mother whose kids had their school canceled, and she doesn't know exactly what to do because she's supposed to work this weekend and she doesn't know who's going to take care of her kids. The governor is now also voicing his frustration after PG&E's website crashed multiple times on Wednesday. They actually had to launch a new website to try to get information out to people, and it comes as there is now a double fire threat across California, both here in Northern California as well as in Southern California, where they could face their own power outages in the coming days. Kimberly.
All right, Will, pretty frustrating there. And speaking of the fires, our meteorology team has been using AR to show just how dangerous they can be and exactly where they're located. So Rob Marciano has the latest. Rob?
I am, and we have several new fires that are breaking out overnight. This just east of the Bay Area, Solano County, one of several, but they're small for now. We have red flag warnings across 6 states. That big blue H is creating these offshore winds, 30 to 50 mile per hour winds. But let's zoom into California, because there is where the terrain is key. We have this three-dimensional augmented reality that really highlights it so well. The Diablo winds, that's Northern California, when winds blow over Mount Diablo. Winds gusting there this morning 75 miles per hour. Will be peaking over the next several hours, and then later on today, today and tonight, we're looking at Southern California, the San Bernardinos, the San Gabriels, the Santa Ana, where those winds get their names from. Winds can gust 50 to 70 miles per hour. Very low levels of humidity, down to 3% in some spots.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And guys, we're going to move over to northern Syria, where Turkey is on day 2 of a long planned attack against the Syrian Kurds, launching airstrikes along the border there. This attack comes after President Trump said he would withdraw U.S. troops from the region to allow the invasion to take place. Now, a reminder, Turkey considers the Kurds to be a terrorist group, but the U.S. worked closely with the Kurds to defeat ISIS in Syria. And when asked yesterday about his discussions with Turkey, here's what he said. Take a listen.
I will wipe out his economy if that happens. I've already done it once with Pastor Brunson. I'm sure that I hope that he will act rationally.
All right, so I want to bring in Ian Pannell, who's actually on the ground in northern Syria with the latest there. Ian?
Yeah, Kimberly, good morning from northern Syria. You know, the last time we were here, we were seeing American and Kurdish forces working hand in hand to defeat ISIS. But this morning, that's all changed. You've got Turkey conducting an invasion of this part of Syria, and that partnership with the U.S. troops on the ground and the battle for ISIS has both been thrown into disarray. Overnight, Turkish forces attacking Syria from the sky and the ground. Machine gun fire can be heard filling the air as we enter day 2 of the assault from Turkey. Turkey claiming to have struck more than 180 targets, launching an all-out assault against America's Kurdish allies who've been on the front lines in the fight against ISIS. A ground attack now also underway this morning. The large-scale operation coming just days after President Trump's announcement to pull U.S. troops back from the border, seemingly giving Turkey a green light. But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is pushing back on that assertion as the administration again appears to send mixed messages.
Yeah, well, that's just false. The United States didn't give Turkey a green light.
One U.S. official now tells ABC News that some Kurdish guards have left their posts at prisons holding ISIS fighters, raising fears that the Turkish incursion could result in ISIS detainees escaping, putting U.S. national security at risk. President Trump distancing himself from the Turkish incursion, calling the operation a bad idea. But when pressed about the potential danger posed by the prisoners if they escape, President Trump seemingly unconcerned.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes.
Turkey's President Erdogan labels the Kurds terrorists and claims the operation will prevent a terror corridor and bring peace.
Smoke rising from artillery shells.
But on the ground, it's not terrorists, but civilians fleeing. Mothers with small babies packing up everything they can, cramming into the back of pickup trucks. But there are few safe places to run to now. The Kurds reporting multiple civilian casualties and at least 5 deaths.
All right, let's go.
We've been on the front lines with the Kurds, watching their troops fight alongside U.S. soldiers for years and keeping ISIS at bay. Just this morning, 2 British ISIS members known as the Beatles, held by the Kurds, but now taken into U.S. custody. President Trump threatening retaliation against Turkey if the Kurds are completely wiped out.
I will wipe out his economy if that happens.
So we've heard strong words from the president, but Kimberly, I can tell you no one here is listening. Not the Turkish army that's driving its forces across the border, and certainly not the Kurds, who are more concerned about staying alive and protecting their homes and their families. You know, we were speaking earlier to a Kurdish intelligence official, and he kept asking, why has America betrayed its friends in the region, saying that nobody in the Middle East would now believe America's word. Kimberly?
Wow. Thank you, Ian, for that report. And we're going to move on to another country in the news, Ukraine, where the president, Vladimir Zelensky, spoke at an all-day news conference with reporters in a food court in the capital about his call with the president, President Trump, in July. And as you know, this call is now the center of a whistleblower's complaint in the ongoing impeachment investigation. So our Tom Yamas was right there at the table with President Zelensky and joins us now. Tom, I just want to ask you about this conversation. You mentioned corruption to him. What did he say? What was he talking about?
That's right. It was pretty extraordinary. The president here in Ukraine doing a 10-hour marathon media session where he's meeting with reporters and taking questions for essentially 10 hours. So we were invited here. We came to sort of a dinner table at this food market surrounded by other journalists. There were about 10 people at our table where we got to fire off some questions to the president. Now, as you mentioned, I did have a chance to speak to him, and I asked him, I said, you campaigned against corruption. In your opinion, then, what do you think of a president who would ask a foreign power to investigate a political rival? Is that corrupt? Here's what he had to say. What do you think of a president asking a foreign nation to investigate a political rival? Is that corrupt?
I think that this is not corruption because it was just called, and he said, you know, we are tired from any corruption things, and you know, and there is, for example, one case about Burisma. Yes, he told, I don't remember all the words because it was too long. I mean that I said that we are not corrupted. So we are open. Any criminal cases you want to ask if it's по закону, да? According to the law. If it's according to the law, okay.
Now, the Ukrainian president says he himself is not corrupt. He did not break any laws. He says it was just a phone call. But when I pressed him if President Trump was corrupt to ask him, as many have criticized him for the United States, for a favor, essentially to dig into a political rival, asking Ukraine to do that, he said he was not going to pass judgment on President Trump and that, to his knowledge, President Trump had not broken any laws yet. But Kimberly, he made it clear he does not want any role in the next election, even though that may be too late at this point.
Yeah, and Tom, I want to ask you, did you guys discuss his thoughts on the U.S. withholding the aid before this call took place?
Right. Some of the news that he gave about that was that he says he was aware of aid being withheld at some point, not during that call, July 25th, the call in question, but afterwards, yes, he knew. He didn't expand into the reasons why it was being held or what he thought he had to do. He didn't really go into too many details. But one thing I did ask him, one of the main issues in that call is that the president asked him about a new prosecutor general here in Ukraine. And President Zelensky says the new person is 100% my person. When I spoke to him here, he used the phrase 100% my man. But when I asked him, I said, did you basically, because the new prosecutor general said he's going to review all corruption cases, including the Burisma case. Now, that's the important one to President Trump, because Burisma is the company that Hunter Biden sat on the board for, that Ukrainian gas company. Now, again, there's been no evidence the Bidens have ever done anything wrong, but President Trump has honed in on the Burisma case and Hunter Biden because Hunter had no experience in the energy sector or working here in Ukraine, and it was a very lucrative position. Now, that being said, I asked him very directly, the president, is the only reason why you're looking at Burisma now again because President Trump asked you to? He sort of took a step back and said, listen, we're looking at all the corruption cases. If the U.S. wants to send lawyers over here, the Attorney General, we'll look at those cases. He goes, personally, I don't care about the Burisma case, but if any laws were broken, I'm going to look into them, and my prosecutor's going to look into them. So clearly, he is definitely doing what the president wanted in that regard.
Yeah, and just before we go, I just want to see, what were your feelings leaving this meeting with all of these journalists sitting around? When you left, what was the feeling, the overall sense that you left with?
You know, President Zelensky is a very interesting person because he played a president on television here. It was as if Ray Romano, say, would be elected president in the United States. He was a very famous TV comedic star, so he's very comfortable in front of the cameras. The cameras were following him everywhere. He does have sort of this Trump quality where he'll stop and just talk to cameras, but if you speak to media here, he hasn't been incredibly accessible. In fact, he hasn't been doing news conferences as much as they would like. He hasn't been taking questions or doing in-depth interviews, but now nobody can really fight that at this point because he's doing 10 hours of interviews and taking questions. You had a chance to ask 1, 2, 3 questions, but he gave very long-winded answers in Ukrainian. The majority of the time that I was there, I honestly had a translator at times, but at times I had no idea what they were talking about because his answers were so long. But he did take the time to speak to me in English because I asked him for our viewers, which he does speak fluent English, and other times he asked for a translator. But he took all these questions for like we said, the plan was 10 hours, so it was a media marathon indeed.
Pretty fascinating there. Tom Yamas, thanks for joining us today right there in Kiev, Ukraine. Thank you so much. And I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House to discuss these past two conversations. Karen, I just want to backtrack to Syria for just a second because the president, he had some interesting comments about this attack yesterday.
Yeah, the president is defending his decision to pull back U.S. troops in northeastern Syria, despite facing very significant blowback from even some close allies. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have all said that this is a big mistake and the wrong decision by the president. Yesterday, though, in a very long Q&A here at the White House, the president signaled that, you know, we've done enough there, that the United States has done their part and now it's time for other countries to step in. He said that the Kurds were not there with the United States during World War II, signaling, you know, perhaps the alliance has not been as deep as some people in Washington have been saying. Now, there, of course, are big concerns about the administration abandoning the Kurds there, who are now being left to fight this Turkish military operation and still have a lot of responsibility as prisoners. Right being held in detention. The president, though, insisted that if massive will into Turkey, he will wipe Turkey's economy, but really no specific what he'll and no specific what his red is at this what Turkey not.
Our major story we just heard has said anything about President Zelensky commenting.
Yeah, the president tweeting about this, saying that President Zelensky has talked. He's once again there was no bribe, there was no quid pro quo here. What we've heard from the president before. I think it says about this point. He says about call because a lot of could the president would say it's how Democrats interpreting this. It's all interference in and get assistance, help getting a rival interest in the president in this or what Ukraine is as. House Democrats say it's all right there.
Get to the whistleblower because, as we said, new information that the whistleblowers is really about who he is or she is.
This is after yesterday during long queue here at the White House. We know that the president has been trying to chip away at the whistleblower's credibility and talking about the second initiative and calling the yesterday, the president said that the whistleblower is a strong Democrat, somebody who has ties to one or more of the president's candidates by the evidence. So last night, the whistleblower their client worked for or advised a political candidate, campaign party. They only contact as election officials, and it's candidates both parties. So part of the normal business here in Washington, people, of course, contact with officials, then might end up running.
Yeah, any people on the Democrats have said President Trump should impeach, but yesterday was a time that Joe Biden uttered those. Why does that matter?
You know, it's him a lot of other Democratic contenders. There's a debate week. This is, of course, would be a big of questions. Topic of the talking points of Democratic candidates. So striking to see the president say that yesterday on the campaign trail, like out of the blue. I don't think people were anticipating that was coming, but it does get him in line with his right.
And before we go, big questions on China today, and the president tweeted that an official is going to be visiting tomorrow.
Yeah, the top trade officials from China are sitting down today with top trade officials from the Trump administration. This is the next big round of talks that have been stalled for several months. The president, the vice premier, tomorrow, White House, only a bit of gamesmanship, saying they ready to make a deal. We'll see how this goes a little bit. You know, I think they're as close as they were a couple weeks ago. That's when the Treasury Secretary had said they were 90% the way there to end. Remember, it's October 10th, 15th, our tariff increase in the United States, 5 tariffs on products, and that was a tariff that the president had delayed for a couple of weeks. We'll see if anything comes out talk next Tuesday that might delay that even further.
All right, lots of things to keep straight there, but we appreciate it. Karen Travers right there at the White House. Thank you so much. And as we told, seen in the Halle, and yesterday, 2 killed in a shooting. It came on Yom Kippur this day on the tragic song James on the in Halle.
Hi, Kimberly. I'm outside the synagogue here in Halle, town just 2 hours south of where that extremist way in. 2 people. Show you here. You can see here Yom Kippur observe. You can see on to the flowers scene. You see much of these days. Big police. Let me show you where the door which he very hard to get in, and let's show you. You'll see the bullet holes on the actual door. Try to his way in. Something like 50 people, at least people in there, serving or able to do. This was by inside police. Some criticism them to get. Couldn't get in, finding himself unable to. He continued this road, killing an individual, found at a cabana on the corner from here. Another, he was paramedics to show him getting out of a firing repeatedly in the middle of the street, live streaming the entire thing, uploading it onto the internet. Now, we've seen that happen before, like in the mosque attacks earlier this year in New Zealand. And we understand that this individual, his name is Stefan Baylett, by the way, had a bit of a history of writing hate speech online, talking about wanting to kill people he described as non-white and specifically Jewish people. So this was a vicious anti-Semitic attack. And I think you have to look at this in the wider context of an uptick in attacks on minorities in general, both here in Germany and across Europe. Kimberly.
All right, James, thank you so much. And guys, with all of this heavy news, I'm really pleased that we're ending the show talking about how all of us are feeling. There's never a reason not to check in with yourself. Just because we're walking around, functioning, living our jobs doesn't experience stress, anxiety, depression of some sort, and to mental on this day here to the world royals for this. Their people ways. Take a look at their account.
Everyone feeling life. Nothing we can do about it.
But that there are things we can do. Friday is a new way to things around.
All right, so it's amazing, and they also Prince Harry. He also posted another video with Ed Sheeran that you have to check out because they're doing forces using their platform. I want to Dr. White, our ABC, to discuss the is that under circumstances don't do silence.
Sure, absolutely important. Is the reality is that really it's very important to understand that, because feeling connected to other people is a very important thing we use in psychiatry for treatment. I thought finding one that has followed the path that you're on is very important to ultimately recovery, help you alone.
I just want to ask symptom that people look out for or serving a friend that may signal you may need some help of some sort.
Sure. A very important question. Typically, well, it's always important to remember that everybody is their own. So there's no this, but does the person look tired? I mean, sleep and sleep. Is or have an activity interested. That is their energy levels. Are they having tasks? If somebody mentioned something about maybe thoughts to not want to be here, that's also another big concern. But again, always very important to remember that it is very individualized, but is having trouble getting clean is absolutely essential. That's a thing that we can.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I know people are, anxiety and depression still be functioning. individuals in lives. So sometimes there aren't symptoms.
That's absolutely correct. Sometimes, want to portray positive energy, want to, project off this image, but they're really covering up some feelings inside. Out that is people to feel connected, which brings up the overall importance of support in general. And one comment that I would like to add is it's important to recognize that support comes in all different forms and facets. So a lot of times we talk about human support, which is absolutely great. I mentioned earlier the importance of possibly getting someone you can look up to, a mentor figure. But say if that might not be the avenue of choice, also remember pets are another great thing to look at. Pet therapy can be very helpful and make people feel a lot less isolated.
Absolutely. So I just want to ask you, before we go, how do you think people can go about breaking down this stigma that there is something wrong with talking about your feelings? We go to the doctor for our physical health, and it is absolutely okay to see someone or ask for help for your mental health. How do we break those stigmas down?
I think kind of as you said, with breaking down stigmas in general, people have to talk about it, but it's the way that it's talked about, the way it's portrayed. I think for people who want to try to break down in kind of a social setting, it's very important to, again, have possibly a mentor figure who can help you through the process, people who know you on an individual basis. And I stress the word as an individual. For those who are saying and those who are listening, it's always important to remember to treat them as an individual, because if you don't say something, there could be gaps of confusion that people fill in with generalized outcomes. So we want to try to minimize that and say things like how does depression affect you, as opposed to you are a depressed person.
Yep.
Things like that is always important to remember.
That makes a lot of sense. So Dr. Danielle Weitzer, appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I love this conversation, and I just want everyone to know I love the hashtag that the Royals use. They said every mind matters. So continue to take care of your mental health. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you tomorrow.
ABC